Throughout my life I made many decisions, and some of them have got me into the right path and some of them into the wrong path. As an individual, those who know me are quick to judge me as different and interesting. This comes from many reasons, but the main reason is because I am known as someone who takes decisions that others will never take. This is a trait of my personality because I don't fear the different. I praise hidden angels and expose fake angels. But throughout of my life, I never taken the path of defending the devil. That is way too scary, even for someone like me. But today I, adinplore, will be attempting to defend the devil for the first time and maybe for the last time on my life.
They send me away to find them a fortune, a chest filled with diamonds and gold. The house was awake with shadows and monsters, the hallways they echoed and groaned.
DIO Brando, born Dario Brando, 1867, is single-handedly the most influential JoJo character, the most important one and one of the most powerful ones and one of the most misunderstood ones. Dio as a villain is one of the most iconic anime villains of all time, and yet he managed to stay in a lane between people liking him and not liking him. As a concept, Dio might seem as a villain who is evil for the sake of being evil, as a villain who is one-dimensional, or as a villain who is bad written, but in the long term, I can prove otherwise. Dio to me and to many people is a psychologically complex character with the deep layers into the story and his mind as a villain. Looking back throughout of JoJo, after reading all of it, Dio is simply one of the most interesting approaches to writing a villain I have ever seen in manga history. I will go through Dio in different stages of his character and how I see him, and I hope this video will change some of you guys' opinions on Dio as a bad villain, because what I see on him is a very unpopular thought in the community. I thought for a while how to approach this video in a way that won't get me into deep things that will be irrelevant, so I came up with a formula that I will call the 7 Deadly Sins. 7 challenges that DIO Brando will go through to prove that he's the ultimate JoJo villain and the devil that everyone will like but no one will love. Dio's backstory as a kid is really sad, and I can tell you that his backstory is where people start to misunderstand him the most. I can honestly think of 4, maybe 5 JoJo characters that have the strong and sad backstory that Dio has. Being born in the wrong family, or better say being born in the worst family, is what Dio went through. Dio as a kid has shown emotions, and those emotions that are of love for his mother, but what triggers him in his mind to be damaged to the level we see him first on part 1 is his father, Dario Brando. That is a bad person by every definition of a bad person. He is everything what is wrong with the world, a person who steals from the dead and drains from his own sins. Dio understands that everything he wants and everything he will want will be taken away from his father, so he gives an end to him in a slow way, but in his last breath, his father takes him to live with the Joestars. So what we understand from this is things that make Dio one of the most unique character writing for a villain I have ever seen. His direct conflict with the world was through himself. By that I mean he didn't have that one day that every single shonen villain has to turn from a spoiled little kid to a complex character, but he always was one. From the day he was born to walk in the darkness of his world, to the day he will stop walking through the darkness of this world and will move on to bigger things. Dio loses that feeling of love after all of this happens, and he is mostly on the sociopathic themes for the rest of JoJo. At the moment that Dario dies, Dio puts on the position when he has to think for the future of himself. Will he go being what his father wasn't? Or was that too late for him? He already chose the path, walking through the darkness to achieve light. I won't judge him or his decision since it was what defines him. Would you rather do nothing on your life and fear of being forgotten, or become something people fear, respect, and know for better? The first complaint many people have towards Dio is that he had no reason to hate the Joestars. Well, that is is not the case. Dio despises the Joestars for many reasons. His dad being the reason he is there is one of them. And Dio is the opposite of the Joestars. He was born in misfortune, and Jonathan is born into the rich. How can you eat without knowing what hunger is? How can you stay above the rest without knowing what the rest are dealing with? How can you call yourself a man without never doing something manly? It's what Dio saw in Jonathan and George. But at the same time, Dio saw himself superior to Jonathan because he knew what the darkness is, and he knew that he deserves the light that Jonathan had. That is Dio's mentality as a kid in part 1. He doesn't respect anyone, not even George Joestar, that considers Dio as a better Jonathan, because Dio knows that deep in George's feeling is the feeling of taking a kid just to be known as someone who helped one in need. So whatever George has those feelings or not is completely irrelevant, but Dio will never want to be called as a family by them. Every single act Dio takes, from killing the dog to kissing Arena, is Dio's attempt to understand himself. He just went along as the kid he was. Dio still thinks he's the victim in this world, and he blames the world himself for what happened to him, and he can by every right. That is why Dio is unlikable. He is part of the unlikable villain group, while the evil in his character trait is experimenting with his power and what he can do and how far can you go. When Jonathan puts up a fight against Dio and he is tired of Dio, Dio understands his limits. That is why when we see Dio as a grown-up in the second half of part 1, he has a simpler approach to his plan by poisoning George Joestar, just as he did with his father, Dario. But even though he got discovered by Jonathan, a lot of people forget this, but after what happened with Dio, Dio still had an advantage over Jonathan in many ways. But one moment out of all made Dio into perfect himself in everything and made him to forget everything he despised. Dio was a character that wasn't able to stand the person he is himself, because deep down in his feeling Dio knows that he's no better than his father, because deep inside him he knew that he wasn't the best. He knew that no matter how stronger and smarter he was compared to Jonathan, he will still be losing to someone else because of his simple nature as human. But 1 in 1 million chances he discovers the stone mask and the power to become a vampire that not only made him to reject his own humanity, and not only made him a better himself in every way possible to every single human, but also Dio found the way to become what he knew he was born for: leading, controlling, and opening doors to bigger things than himself. After Dio becomes a vampire, he matures himself to a point that he sees himself beyond everything, beyond life and death, beyond all humans and beyond all monsters. He sees himself as a man who walked into the beauty of immortality, stole the power of the undead, and created the root to change the destiny of himself and the entire world. Dio has shown many sociopathic traits, like toying with his victims, making himself look gaulier, and even doing stuff that will get him noticed by a larger amount of people. And all of this plays into his personality that, in my opinion, seeing Dio scream muda 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 and rawr is one of the joys of watching JoJo. Now let's talk about the best thing about part 1, and that is the duality between Dio and Jonathan. Jonathan isn't the reason why Dio was abused and had a hard childhood, but Dio was the reason why Jonathan had that rough childhood. As I went through Jonathan in his video, I will say that Jonathan never giving up and fighting back everything he gave after Dio did what he did. Dio still respected Jonathan for that, and that is a big gap of development Dio gets when Dio sees himself in Jonathan as a kid who lost everything trying to get everything back, just like Dio was back in the day. After Dio feels that for Jonathan, he achieved to the point of the parallel journey to him. He isn't mad when he wins over him in the fight they have at the mansion. Even though he sees himself above all humans, he has respect for Jonathan, and that little respect turned him to the final part of part 1 and the act where Jonathan dies, and Dio respecting Jonathan to the last way by the respect by literally getting his body and putting his head on him. Dio waited 100 years on the ocean until he came back up to the world, and that is where we get the completely different Dio, all capital letters, the Dio from part 3, Stardust Crusaders. Dio in part 3 is different from part 1, coming up from his looks. His body is way more charming than before, he doesn't wear clothes, he stays half nude, unrespecting Jonathan's body, and over that he makes love with many women, some of them eating to survive and some of them leaving to go. Later on we learn that by the result of this, Dio left sons behind, one of them being the protagonist of part 5, Giovanna. Giovanna's character journey is completely different from Dio's, that makes him an amazing character of its own, but just the idea of Dio having sons like that is something that plays on one of the 7 deadly sins, the lust. Dio in part 3 is easily one of the most powerful characters in fiction, and not powerful in power alone, but in views, in mindset, in acting, in pride, and in the way he walks, reads, fights, and everything he does makes him just to have that godly complex that even if he doesn't try to be a god, or even if he doesn't mean to have a godly complex, Dio has that. Even Dio means God, and Dio is a god to himself, a god to others, and a god to the universe, since he changes the universe, shapes the universe more than God does himself in JoJo. But really, Dio in part 3 is really that godly. Going from that, it's fair to say that Dio is rather calm, rather he knows his position and he has a tendency to keep that. He isn't really overconfident on himself, but he's more realistic. He knows that he's the most powerful stand user in the world by that time, so when everybody is attacking him, he doesn't bear to go look at them, he just continues reading even though his life is in danger in every single second. He knows that his place and his time is when he is. He knows that his power and his goal is when he's meant to be, and he knows himself and his opponent, Dio Brando.
There are many types of monsters in this world. Monsters who will not show themselves and who cause trouble. Monsters who abduct children. Monsters who devour dreams. Monsters who suck blood. And monsters who always tell lies. Lying monsters are a real nuisance. They are much more cunning than other monsters.
They pose as humans, even though they have no understanding of the human heart. They eat, even though they've never experienced hunger. They study, even though they have no interest in academics. They seek friendship, even though they do not know how to love. If I were to encounter such a monster, I would likely be eaten by it. Because in truth, I am that monster.
What Dio is, Dio Brando isn't. Part 3 Dio is mature and he has things that stand out on believing that changing the world is for him. He changes from a villain on a simple world leading to a villain that wants to make it better for everyone. When I say Dio is the most important JoJo character, I mean that. Part 1 is Dio Brando's story. Part 2 is Dio's mask. Part 3 is Dio. Part 4 is Dio's story just for the arrows. Part 5 is Dio's son. Part 6 is Dio's boyfriend. Part 7 is Diego, alternate Dio story. And Part 8 is Part 8. All of this influence in the story and having to be a villain called as simple and hated, where does it hate come from? I mean, I see why so many people switch beliefs in Dio, but I can see why they do that. From part 1 to part 3, Dio is a character that is completely different, and many people don't understand why he is like that. We need to go back to 3 years before part 3 to understand, but before we do that, let's just talk about the end of part 3 and what we know about Dio's death Even though that's really funny to say for me, because Dio did more when he was dead than when he was alive, and that is a fact, because if we count all the years that Dio has been into the surface of the earth, it won't even surpass a solid 30, and his impact goes through 150 plus years of the storyline. Dio has anger issues, and that is even not arguable thing, and even though him believing that he is stronger and all that narcissism that is come from his sociopathic tendencies got him defeated by Jonathan, Jotaro in this case in part 3, and him being a simple naive move, that simple naive move by Dio that not only tried to perfect himself but wasn't ready to understand that him being taken out. Why was he taken out? Why me, Dio, the god? Why was I taken out? In the third person referring to yourself like that is just something extremely narcissistic, yet he doesn't seem to believe that he was taken out, even though it's clear that Jotaro won square and fair, even though Jotaro kinda did a plot twist at the end, but doesn't really change anything what Dio is meant to show in this moment. That not even understanding why he was taken out, he was. Now let's give more context behind it, behind his anger and confusion and drama all around Dio, and let's explain his psychologically complex side after part 3, and of course I'm talking about his part 6 self. What makes Dio one of the most psychologically complex characters in JoJo is Dio understanding the meaning of life. Why we wake up every single day? Why did I do what I did? Why did I kill those many people? Why having the strongest stance even matters? Why me saying what I am even matters? Why my existence matters? Well, that is simple. It doesn't. It's really pointless. Everything I did 100 years ago and everything I am basically doing after 100 years, me being in the best, me remembering my best, me being the best in the future, me fighting for myself, me loving, me hating, me killing, me giving life is just pointless. Why do people have to go through that? What have I done? What other people have done? Nobody deserves to go through what I did. Nobody deserves to go through what I will go through. So people just need to know and understand how pointless this existence is in the day they do it. So people just don't roll around and do pointless stuff, but just know what their destiny is about. Why search to be happy? Why even try to be happy? What even is to be happy? To be rich? To be famous? To be powerful? Will that even make you happy? What is true happiness? Is true happiness a real thing? Is it all an illusion? And that is when Dio came up with a plan for heaven with his friend Pucci. Enrico Pucci to Dio is surely something special. Pucci for Dio is his only friend, the only person who he considered close, the only person who he knew that he can trust is Pucci. Pucci isn't like Dio or any like of Dio's villains. He disagrees with Dio in many times, and as we see in the flashbacks, that disagreement makes Dio to believe him more. Dio doesn't want to be surrounded by people who only agree with him. Also, Pucci is more than just a Dio. He's his own character with a lot more to him. So there is when heaven is created, the plan to achieve heaven.
必要なものは私のスタンドである。必要なものは信頼できる友である。必要なものは極罪を犯した36名以上の魂である。必要なものは14の言葉である。必要なものは勇気である。朽ちていく私のスタンドは36の罪人の魂を集めて吸収。そこから新しいものを生み出すである。最後に必要なものは場所である。北緯28度24分、西経80度36分へ行き、次の新月の時を待て。それが天国の時であろう。
This heaven Dio talks about is different from any concept in fiction related to heavening or heaven place. And as you know why Dio is amazing. He won. He created heaven after all. Made in heaven happen. And heaven happened through. Dio won even though he was dead. Everything he wanted to happen happened in a way or another. Maybe not him being there. Maybe not being destined to be there. But it happened. Dio won. Or so we thought he won. Dio is the one character villain that always wants more. He didn't want just to get away from his dad, he wanted to take over the Joestars. He didn't want to just take over the Joestar, he wanted to become a god. He didn't just want to become a god, he wanted to find peace for everyone in every way, with every timeline, heaven. But hasn't been there? Weren't he there? Isn't there more than that? JoJo has infinite realities, so Dio over heaven in the game is somewhere in JoJo real for an alternate universe canon from the infinite universes there are in JoJo. And yes, Dio winning over heaven happened and made Dio to go even more timelines and win there as well. A never-ending battle to achieve more than you can. This character journey of the main chat villain in JoJo, one of the most iconic deep characters, DIO Brando, the vampire who broke through the 7 deadly sins and became more than just a man, vampire or god. After all of those character analytics videos that are about Dio in YouTube, this is what I came up with, and that is what I have to say about the devil himself. Did I do a good job? Probably not. I could have said way more because there is so much to talk about Dio, but I try to break down what I personally see on him myself. I hope people realize that Dio is a complex villain and a good one, not just a simple one. Anyways, for anyone wondering why I didn't talk about Diego Brando, yes, I am one of the many people who likes Diego over Dio, and I can say that Diego is even more for me than Dio is, and he's amazing, so I will talk about him when time comes. Dio isn't my favorite JoJo villain. In fact, he's one of the least favorite antagonists from JoJo, believe it or not. He's at my bottom of my list. Every devil, but as they say, every devil has a smile as you can give, as you can God give a bit of humanity. Please be a vampire that can be broken. Dio did what he did, that is why he is an amazing villain for it.
We go back, we relax, hentai in the back, on the low, counting racks.